There is a type of pain that the world never prepares you for. Not the kind that bleeds, not the kind a doctor can find. The kind that lives in your chest at 3 in the morning when the room is completely silent and your phone is dark and you are lying there replaying a conversation that you still cannot believe actually happened. A conversation with someone who knew you, not the version of you that exists online, not the polished version, not the laughing version, the real one, the one who called them from a parking lot crying and could not even explain why. The one who told them things that had never been said out loud to another living person. The one who trusted them with the parts of yourself you were most ashamed of. That is the wound I am talking about tonight, and if you have felt it, if you know that specific quiet, devastating feeling of looking at someone and thinking, I never thought it would be you, then stay with me. Because tonight we are not doing a highlight reel. We are not talking about morning routines or hustle culture or 5 habits of successful people. Just truth. One honest conversation in a world that has almost forgotten what honest feels like. Here at ZestifyUp, we exist for one reason only. To help you amplify your potential. And sometimes, amplifying your potential means sitting down inside the most painful chapter of your life and refusing to look away from it. Tonight we look directly at it. Love, loyalty, betrayal. And what happens to a person's soul when the people they chose with everything they had do not choose them back. We are going to walk through this through the mind of one of the most misunderstood human beings who ever lived. Niccolo Machiavelli. Most people hear that name and think manipulation, ruthlessness, cold strategy, power at any cost. But that is not who Machiavelli was. Machiavelli was a man who loved deeply, who served loyally, who gave the best years of his life to people and institutions he genuinely believed in, and then watched them take everything from him. He was imprisoned, he was tortured, he was stripped of everything he had built, and then he was exiled to a small farm outside Florence where the same world that had celebrated him forgot he existed. And from that silence, from that specific crushing personal silence of being forgotten by people who once needed you, he wrote, not to teach manipulation, not to teach cruelty, but to warn every person who has ever loved too freely, trusted too completely, and given too generously what this world will do to you if you stop paying attention. That is the Machiavelli most people never meet. We are meeting him tonight. Pain is the original bond between human beings, and that is both the most beautiful thing about us and the most dangerous. Think about the people you are closest to, or the people you were once closest to. Where did it start? Not at a party, not at a rooftop, not during your best season when everything was working and you were untouchable. It started in the dark. A conversation at 2 a.m. that began with, I have never told anyone this. A moment where someone sat with you on a bathroom floor and did not try to fix anything, just stayed. A season of being broke together, confused together, invisible together, rejected together, scared together. 2 people recognizing themselves inside each other. That is where real bonds form, not in success, in survival. And that bond is sacred. It is one of the most real things human beings are capable of producing between them. But here is what Machiavelli would warn you about. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. A survival bond is not automatically a growth bond. They are completely different categories of human connection. And confusing them is one of the most heartbreaking mistakes a loyal person can make. The person who sat with you in your worst chapter is not automatically built for your best one. Let me say that again. The person who sat with you in your worst chapter is not automatically built for your best one. Some people are companions for surviving the night, not architects for building the day. And when you start rising, when you start healing, when you start becoming something larger than the person they found in the dark, something shifts between you. You feel it before you have words for it. You share a win, a breakthrough, something you are genuinely proud of, and you watch their face, and something is missing. Not anger, not happiness. Just a half second of something that disappears quickly behind a smile. And you tell yourself you imagined it. You tell yourself they are just tired. You tell yourself everything is fine. but the body knows before the mind admits. The jokes begin to carry a sharper edge. The support becomes slower to arrive. The conversations get thinner. There is a new weight in the silences, an absence where enthusiasm used to live. And you explain it away, because you love them. But somewhere beneath all of that, somewhere you did not want to look, you already knew. Envy does not arrive wearing its real face. And this is where Machiavelli becomes uncomfortably accurate. Machiavelli studied envy more deeply than almost any philosopher before or since. Not because he was cynical, but because he watched it destroy friendships, collapse families, and bring down entire governments from the inside. Hatred is obvious. Hatred announces itself, anger declares itself, sadness asks to be witnessed. But envy wears the face of love. It smiles at your news. It says, "I am so proud of you." It shows up at your event and takes photos and writes beautiful things about you publicly. And underneath all of that, quietly, privately, it is hoping the thing you are building falls apart. Not because it hates you, that would almost be easier to identify. It hopes you fail because your success has become a mirror it cannot stand to look into. Because your evolution is proof that the life they are still living was a choice, not a sentence. And that truth is almost unbearable for some people to sit with. So instead of doing the hard internal work of changing their own life, they begin sometimes without even realizing it to try to slow yours down. And this is where it becomes subtle and devastating. They stop sharing your work. They become suddenly skeptical of every idea you have. They introduce doubt into your plans with just enough plausible deniability that you cannot call it out without looking paranoid. I am just being honest. I am just playing devil's advocate. I just do not want you to get hurt. Machiavelli called this a false counselor. Someone who presents themselves as your protector while quietly operating as your obstacle. And the most devastating part is that they may not even know they are doing it. Envy is often unconscious. A person can genuinely love you and simultaneously feel threatened by your evolution. Both things can be true at the same time inside the same person. Understanding this will save you from two equal and opposite mistakes. The first mistake is assuming that everyone who subtly undermines you is evil. The second mistake is ignoring the pattern because you love them. Machiavelli's answer was not revenge, not coldness, clarity. See people as they are, not as you need them to be. And deep down, even then, you already knew. Now think about the person who hurt you the deepest. Not a stranger, not someone on the edges of your life, the one whose betrayal genuinely rearranged something inside you, the one that changed you. They knew things about you that nobody else knew. They knew the fear you had carried since childhood that you had never said aloud to another human being. They knew the dream you were too embarrassed to speak in full sentences. They knew the moment you almost gave up on yourself completely. They knew the thing that broke you before you even had language for what it was. And that is precisely why their betrayal hit differently. It was not just an action against you, it was a weaponization of your vulnerability. They did not stumble into your wound accidentally. They had the map. You gave them the map. Because you loved them. Because you trusted them. Because vulnerability felt safe in their presence. And I want to say something directly if you have lived this. Your willingness to be vulnerable was not the mistake. Your willingness to be vulnerable was not the mistake. Opening yourself to another human being is one of the most courageous things we are capable of. It goes against every survival instinct we carry, every wall we built, every lesson that told us not to need people too much. You chose to love someone past all of that. That was not weakness. That was extraordinary. But here is what Machiavelli would add. Courage without discernment is an open wound without a door. The goal is not to become cold, not to stop trusting, not to punish every future person for what one person did. The goal is to learn to read people clearly before handing them the knife. That is a skill, not a personality trait. A skill. One Machiavelli spent years trying to teach. And here is the wound nobody talks about honestly. Some people leave long before they disappear, because the dramatic betrayal at least is legible. At least you can build a timeline. At least you know what happened and when. The slow departure is different, and in many ways it is so much worse, Because it happens while everything still looks fine on the surface. They are still in your life technically. They still show up occasionally. They still answer sometimes. But something is missing. Something is gone. The calls get shorter. The energy gets thinner. The conversations that used to run 3 hours now barely fill a few minutes, and you are both clearly reaching for things to say. There is a performance quality to it now. Like two people playing the characters of friends in a friendship that has already ended on some level neither of you has admitted yet. And the most heartbreaking part, you already knew, somewhere in your body. In the quiet intelligence that lives beneath conscious thought, you already knew, but you did not want to know. So you performed not knowing. You texted first. You made the plans. You carried the entire weight of keeping the connection alive. And somewhere along the way, you realized you had been holding the hand of someone who already let go, and you were the only one who noticed. That feeling of mourning a friendship in private while pretending publicly that everything is fine, that changes people permanently. That specific loneliness of sitting right beside someone you once trusted completely and feeling further from them than if they were on the other side of the world. That changes you. You stopped being the person who needed saving, and they stopped knowing what to do with you, so they left. Not because you grew wrong, because you grew. Machiavelli sat in that same silence, a man who gave Florence everything, his intelligence, his loyalty, his years, and found himself sitting alone on a farm watching the people who once needed him pretend he never existed. Machiavelli lost Florence, you lost a friend. Different scale, same lesson. The pain is not that they left, the pain is that they left carrying pieces of you. That is why his writing still feels alive 5 centuries later. Not because it came from power, because it came from grief. When people read him saying it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both, most people heard cruelty. What I hear is heartbreak. The words of a man who loved deeply and finally stopped being surprised by human nature. And here is the part that almost nobody quotes from Machiavelli. After everything. After the imprisonment, the torture, the exile, the silence. He concluded that most people are loyal to advantage, not to person. And when the advantage disappears, the people built on that foundation disappear with it. Some people leave long before they disappear, and looking back, you already knew. But he also concluded something quieter. Something I think he meant more deeply than anything else he ever wrote. The rare person who stays when there is no advantage to staying is worth more than everything you have ever lost combined. One person who shows up when you are nothing is worth more than 1,000 people who celebrated you when you were something. Let that land. Because some of you are so consumed by the grief of the betrayal that you are barely noticing the ones who stayed. The one who answered the phone at midnight during your worst week. The one who did not need you to be okay. Who was just willing to sit inside the not okay with you. The one who never changed the way they spoke to you when your circumstances changed. The one who never needed a reason to check on you. That person. Protect that person with everything you have. Because genuine loyalty in a world built on transaction is becoming extinct. And then there is the betrayal nobody talks about enough. Not the private one, the public one. The moment where someone who knows the truth, your truth, the real version of what happened, chooses the safer side, chooses the larger crowd, chooses the narrative that costs them nothing even when the cost falls entirely on you. Machiavelli understood that human beings are social animals before they are moral ones. For most people, social belonging is a more immediate survival signal than abstract truth. So when a crowd forms around a narrative, even a wrong one, even a dishonest one, even one that multiple people in that crowd privately know is false, most individuals will not break from the crowd. Not because they are evil, because they are afraid. And if you have experienced this, if you have stood inside the truth of something knowing you were right, knowing that certain people around you also knew you were right, and still watched them choose the comfortable crowd over the accurate account. I understand why that particular wound goes so deep, because it is not just about being outnumbered. It is about being seen, and still left alone. And the worst part, you already knew who would stay and who would fold. You saw the hesitation in them long before the moment of truth arrived. You just loved them enough to hope you were wrong. So what do you do now? How do you move forward without becoming cold? How do you stay open without becoming naive? The answer is not suspicion. The answer is observation. Ask yourself 3 questions about the people in your life. Do they celebrate your growth? Not tolerate it. Celebrate it. Do they protect your absence? When you leave the room, do they defend your name or join the conversation against you? And do they tell you the truth when it costs them? Not when it is easy. When honesty carries a price. If someone consistently does those 3 things, hold them close. They are rare. Genuinely rare. If someone consistently fails those 3 tests, then believe what you are seeing, not what you are hoping, not what you remember, not what they used to be, what they are showing you now, because seeing clearly is not cruelty, it is wisdom, and wisdom is what allows love to survive reality. Now, I want to say something to you directly. If you have been betrayed, if that betrayal has left you questioning yourself, wondering what you did wrong, replaying the timeline, trying to find the moment you failed, stop. Betrayal is not evidence that you loved wrong. It is evidence that you loved someone who was not yet capable of receiving what you were offering. There is a crucial difference. And pain, real pain, the kind that genuinely rearranges you, always has a function. It is removing from your life what your future cannot afford to sustain. Every person who betrayed you was carrying a cost that the version of you who is coming cannot afford to keep paying. Not because they were necessarily bad people, but because the version of you that is arriving, the healed version, the version that finally understands its own worth, that version was not possible inside the relationship that just ended. You are not losing a love. You are being prepared for one. I know that sounds abstract when the wound is still fresh, so I am not asking you to believe it tonight. I am asking you to write it down and come back to it in 6 months, and tell me if it still sounds abstract. Because here is the thing Machiavelli understood that nobody teaches. The goal is not to become someone who cannot be hurt. The only people who cannot be hurt are the ones who cannot truly connect. The goal is to become someone who chooses more wisely where to extend their full self. Someone who reads patterns earlier, who pays attention to actions more than words, who requires consistency over time rather than passion in the moment, who holds their vulnerability sacred and extends it only to those who have demonstrated they understand what it is worth. That is not coldness. That is wisdom. And wisdom is what pain properly processed actually produces. Not bitterness, not armor, discernment. When you start seeing people clearly, really clearly, without the stories, without the excuses, without the fantasy of who you needed them to be, something unexpected happens. You do not become cold, you become free. Because the chapter ending was never proof you were unworthy of loyalty. It was proof that some people are only meant to accompany you through the night, not into the sunrise. And the moment you stop chasing people who have already left is the moment you finally return to yourself. I want to close with something I mean completely. Tonight there are people listening to this sitting inside the specific silence that follows betrayal. The room that looks exactly the same but feels completely different. The phone in your hand with no one to text about what you are actually feeling. The strange, quiet grief of mourning someone who is still alive. I see that. This channel exists for this exact moment, not for the highlight reel, for the honest conversation. The one that happens underneath the performance of being fine. We are here for one thing only, to help you amplify your potential. And we believe with everything we are that your greatest potential lies on the other side of the pain you are currently sitting inside. You loved hard. In a world that rewards convenience, you stayed loyal. In a climate that punishes vulnerability, you opened yourself completely. You were real in a culture that has nearly forgotten what real looks like. That is not your failure. That is your nature. And your nature, however expensive it has been, however much it has cost you, is your greatest asset. Because the world quietly, desperately, is searching for people who are still capable of genuine love. People who have not been fully hardened by disappointment. People who can still look at another human being and say, "I choose you." Not because it is convenient, not because you are perfect, because I see you. And I am still here. Hold on to the people in your life who mean that when they say it. Tell them. Out loud. Today. Not eventually. Today. Because life moves faster than any of us account for. People disappear without warning. And real loyalty should never go unspoken. And I want to say one more thing. To the version of you sitting there tonight still defending someone who stopped defending you a long time ago. Still making excuses for someone who has never once made one for you. Still loving someone at full volume while they love you in silence. You are not weak for that. You are just someone who has not yet decided that you deserve the same love you give. That decision starts tonight. The purpose of everything we just walked through was never to make you trust less. It was to teach you how to trust wisely, not to close your heart, but to protect its gates. Because the person who has survived genuine betrayal and emerged from it with their capacity for love intact is one of the most powerful forces in human existence. They have been tested, genuinely tested, at the deepest level, and they chose to remain human. That is not weakness, that is the rarest form of strength. Subscribe and stay with ZestifyUp. There is more truth coming, and you already know you need it. To the one who stayed when everyone else left, you already know who you are. So welcome back, future king. This was always for you.